only person I know who looked at entrepreneurship as a career.
Well, at the
career
time,
step, yeah.
up until I walked in.
Yeah, and then you realize, oh.
When I cancelled medical aids and did all of these things, then I got diagnosed with TB. Because I was a patient and I kept on just having this like experience, I'm like, no man, there has to be something within this particular space that I've been experiencing as a patient, and I feel like I should create something there. So I feel like that's how Technovera technically was born. I initially started saying, I just want one clinic. I applied, they gave me R1 million. I went and built a product out of that. So I built that first smart locker. Went back to the city of Johannesburg and said, can I have one clinic? Yo, I struggled.
And here's the irony, right? Like, they gave you money, state money, to build a solution to make the city better.
To build a solution to make the city better.
And then now
I struggled.
You can't get them as a client. How's it, everybody? Welcome back. We've got an amazing guest. I know I feel like I say that all the time, but like I can't. I mean, it's the truth, right? And in this case,
we are all amazing.
Yeah,
it's all
this
about
is true.
The favorite kids.
No modesty required. I'm joined today by Neo, an amazing entrepreneur, social impact entrepreneur, a gentleman I've known for a while now, and we're actually doing some cool stuff together. With maybe no further ado and all of that sort of stuff, let's just get into it now. You've been doing this for a while now. Entrepreneurship, social impact. It's one phenomenal, hard journey. In fact, we were talking about that it takes so long for things to converge, right? Mm. But before we get to the convergence, what I like to do is spend some time on where it all began. Like, the seedling stuff, like, where's home? And, did you always know you wanted to be an entrepreneur? Were the entrepreneurs around your house? Like, where did it all begin?
Yeah. Originally from Northern Cape, Kuruman, a village called Batlaros. I guess it's always bordered on whether it's Northern Cape, and then in some instances it's Northwest. So born and initially raised that side, then moved to Mahikeng, Northwest, both primary and high school. I feel like that was a significant portion of my formative years. Originally lived in a prison.
What are you talking about?
One of my parents was a correctional service guard.
That's an important part of that stage.
Yeah, so one of my parents was a correctional service guard, so we stayed within normally some prisons will have houses, because the prisons will normally be quite far away from the city.
Right. And
we'd have to take a bus between the prison and the town to get to school. So Mahikeng is definitely a place that I've called home for quite some time. But at the moment, actually, none of my parents are in Mahikeng. They've moved back to their village. So that whole typical, we are retiring, we were back to
the Northern Cape side.
We go back to the Northern Cape side because that's where our community and people are. I went to a primary school called DP Kotleng, and high school was Mabata High School. Really, really good memories. And it was, I think Mabata is a very, everybody who comes from there speaks very positively about it. Yeah. I feel like it's...
And they had just that generation of crop of people that came out of that school that,
Yeah, exactly. I feel like you'll have your double HPs, you'll have your KB Mutsilanyane, you'll have your Stone, you'll have all of these celebrities that come from part of the world. You have the whole Motswako sort of crew, your Duke Singanga, and there's always been that feeling of great quality people come out of this town, go on to do great things.
Was it in the water? What was it about it? Or was it insular? What was it?
I think it's there are elements where, when you think about it from, the apartheid side, right? You had Boputa Tswana, you did have a lot of investment going into some of the structures like Mabana, arts,
Yes.
and it created a lot of, and you had like some of the best gymnasts in the country coming from there. There was always these extramural things that we always do. And again,
And they invested in the media as
they
well.
invested in the media. They
Botswana,
invested in
like Bob TV
sports.
and all of that
Yeah,
stuff,
they
right?
invested in sports. Like I mean, a significant portion of my high school years was going to Mabatu Stadium to play tennis. And also you think about like, man, you're a black guy,
Playing tennis.
tennis infrastructure, like how does that work? But there was a lot of that pride, and I think because they were, even the generation before me, like my coaches were people that really, really felt that it's part of their identity. And you'd see a lot of people going and representing South Africa in the Olympics as gymnasts who are within your city or within your area. And I think it is that success breeds success. You get to see other people, you get to see them effectively being able to have particular trajectories, and it becomes accessible to you even in your ability to engage with that person.
So
As well.
where did you see, I suppose, successful entrepreneurs, or what was it then for you that sort of success bred success in a way?
I think entrepreneurship sort of featured way later in my years, I guess.
Because you did corporate for a bit.
I did some corporate for a bit. I mean, I definitely wasn't one of those. I was like, everybody in my family was an entrepreneur. Like I think if you had asked me earlier, would I have considered entrepreneurship? I'm not one of those people that like, I had a business when I was in high school. Nope, I wasn't.
Oh, we found one. So you know, one of those. It's like,
I was not one
like,
of those. I wasn't trying to hustle selling sweets, and I wasn't one of those.
So you're that rare species that had zero inkling.
I was a consumer. I would buy from other entrepreneurs. I wasn't all about that whole, like, I didn't help my dad and my people with like doing accounting and maths and so on. I'm like, let that be for other people. Like, I guess even when I left high school, right, it was very much on, I went to, like, I mean, my high school I regard as a really good school. I went to a really good school. I felt that I wasn't necessarily clear on what I wanted to do, but it was very clear on, like, do something because you have good maths, you have good marks, go do something that pays well. Like, that was the first objective. There was a context of trying to do those assessments of what are you going to be good at, and they tell you something else. You're like, I don't agree with you. So for me, my simplest decision in career was do what my physics teacher tells me to do. And he's like, look, now, here's how it plays out. Do engineering. It pays relatively well. And also, there's a context where, because I come from Kuruman, you have a lot of mining towns. Within a mine, one of the best sort of, I guess, career progression sort of journey is being an engineer within the mining sector. And often enough, a lot of the leaders that run mines are engineers themselves. So then you start to orientate towards, say, okay, this makes sense. Your teacher says, look, your marks are good. But I think the deciding factor was very much my parents saying, look, we don't have money for university. You need to figure out how you're going to find a bursary. And fortunate enough, they told me in grade 10. Like, so at least that was helpful. And ultimately, then I knew that, fine, if I want to go to university, I have to find the money myself. There's no savings account that says, you'll go to university. And grade 11 or standard 9 became very clear for me that, okay, you want to be able to get good marks so that by the time you get to matric, you're able to get the right bursary. And then at the time, I remember researching what is the one career that gives you the most amount of bursaries: electrical engineering and mechanical engineering. Because you have corporates giving out electrical engineering, you have banks also giving out electrical engineering degrees. And
bursaries,
sorry. It became very clear that, okay, fine. From a numbers games perspective, if Sasol is giving electrical engineering, ArcelorMittal, Kumba, Anglo, whoever's giving out bursaries, all of them have electrical somewhere. And then there was like Shanduka, Tuduka, who like, if you want to do accounting, then you can go that route. And I was like, no, I'm not doing accounting. Fast forward, deep down inside, I wanted to do biomedical. And I think Wits was the only one that offered biomedical engineering as an undergrad. Applied, got in, but didn't have a bursary for biomedical, but did have a bursary for electrical. Went to Klerksdorp, got on a bus, went to UCT, and did my degree. And after that, and also I think at the time, the nice part about a bursary is that if it's offered by a corporate, at least you also have the pathway into work. And if you do well in varsity, ultimately you feel like, no man, I should get selected. So I guess my career into work was also very much on, you gave me money to go study this thing, so can I take a job? So
let me pay you back.
So I had a bursary from ArcelorMittal, like really good bursary. They give you money when you're in varsity, so it was like, okay, cool, conditions met, cover majority of the stuff that you need, and I feel like that's how the selection of what I wanted to, like, I didn't have anybody who was electrical engineer in my community. It wasn't like something that's accessible.
Did you enjoy it though? Like
I did. I actually did. I think it was a degree of fortune that I did like resonate with it, and I guess my personality has also been like, I've always been a positive person. I feel like if I jump into something, like, I'm all in, I try and figure out how to make it work. I've always liked this principle of effectuation. So like, you always try and look at what's available to you and you figure out how you make that work, instead of always being like only stuck in how you want things to be, versus what they are reality. How do you wake up every day and try and make that reality the best version
but
of
you
it
didn't
possible?
Even now in hindsight, maybe feel like you missed out on doing the biomedical side thing?
I think the bio thing was, there was an element where I was like, ooh, I'm flirting with this idea of doing medicine, but I didn't necessarily feel like I wanted to be a doctor.
Right.
And I guess it was a preferred profession because it was very like highly regarded and so on. But like deep down inside, and then there was an element where like a couple of shows that came up when I was in high school about male nurses that were very positive, and I was like, oh, I could consider being a male nurse. I remember going to a hospital, walking around with the matron. I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Killed that dream very quickly.
That killed that dream. The biomedical part was still at least a component of within the field of medicine, within the field of surgery, within the field of hospitals, but still living the engineering sort of.
Isn't it ironic that you've sort of merged the two now?
And it definitely feels like, life has a way of playing
itself
tricks
out,
on
right?
you. And
I mean, it's like literally you're applying both skill sets
exactly
natively.
in the same space. Yeah. So anyway, fast forward, did a really good. Varsity was good. Varsity was fun. I think engineering resonated with me. The problem solving, the analytical part, the ability to always arrive at a solution, I think resonated with me. It didn't feel ambiguous all the time. And I mean, obviously, in varsity, you try and do all of the other extra courses and African studies, and you're like, but like, this doesn't feel like it has an end. It doesn't feel like it's as well structured and as well defined. So I then started. I moved from Cape Town when I finished. Moved to the Vaal. Moved to Vereniging. Was allocated a factory, and started working as an electrical engineer / projects engineer. So that was the segue into my corporate experience. And so deeply grateful to that first company, because I felt like it was very formative. You're walking into like a staunch Afrikaans Vaal area with where you're like, okay, but you're from the Northern Cape, but you don't speak Afrikaans. And I'm like,
Yeah.
so did
And
literally,
and what they say about like your 20s should be your apprenticeship years. That's where you should actually look and try and test everything, because you don't know what you don't know.
yeah. Um, and I think that's where also graduate programs are great for that, because I think they enable you to have a softer landing into spaces, to allow the people around you to influence and form how you think.
But also the reverse can be true. If you have a bad soft landing, could put you off something you could have otherwise enjoyed, right? Because
Yeah.
it's like, how when I travel, if I rock up in a city and the weather is great, or my stay because of the weather, it's like,
Love
it
it.
just it puts a hue on how you remember the place, right? As opposed if you get there, it's cold, it's raining, you'll have that as the backdrop of your experience there.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming you had a very good landing then.
Yeah. So I think what I definitely appreciated is that the way that they structure their graduate program is that there's a degree of rotational pieces, so you get to go to different factories.
Yeah.
So if you feel like it's not a good fit, and it's a big company, so
Right.
you do have an ability to talk to a mentor who's not your direct manager, for them to try you out in a different location. So I do think that if one is vocal, if one is able to try and read the room and try and say, like, not such a great fit, but then trying to say, look, I'm not leaving, I'm trying to move within this particular structure, that's good.
So it wasn't difficult with the language, the Afrikaans thing, and
I think it was difficult. There was an adjustment piece. There was a context of like, okay, I was a little bit of I'm not going to learn. So like, let me just focus on like doing the work and try and get around it in a way. Try and get people to respect you, not for the fact that you can speak the language, but rather that you can still do the work.
Right.
Obviously, it is very helpful if you're able to meet people where they are. But ultimately, I felt that because I practice just being good at my work, it also always has a way to be able to overcompensate for certain things. So, like, really loved the ability to move from theory to practice, and you start to realize what matters in an organization: production targets, quality, meeting client expectations. All of those are not necessarily stuff that you are like, you're doing triple integrals in second year maths. Like it's never gonna
play out the way you thought. Yeah.
But you ultimately feel the ability to work with people, the ability to provide solutions, the ability to solve technical problems that ultimately help your production process very well.
And you stayed in corporate for another 7 years or so?
Yeah, so after the graduate program, I worked as an engineer, and then after I did I think it was about 3 years in, I met our CEO at the time. We had Nonguluka Heitanyembezi as our CEO at the time, and met her. She's like, "Hey, what do you want to do?" I was like, "I'm interested in..."
And she's a powerhouse.
And she's a powerhouse.
Yeah.
Like one of the best leaders that I've ever come across. And I was like, and there was a moment where obviously this is like breakfast with the CEO type of thing that they structure. And I was like, I want to come learn from you. Took my shot. I was like, let me just go for it. And, I think about a year later, I get an email saying, hey, we've got a incoming COO. So ArcelorMittal has this thing where they try and match a local CEO with they'll also have an expat because they try and do skills rotations for their executives in the globe. So then there was a German COO coming, and I received an email saying, come interview with this guy. Came, interviewed with him, killed it, got a job as a technical assistant to him, technical assistant to the COO. It was mostly like looking after operational risk. So instead of just being based at one factory, you're looking after all of the different 5 factories that we have in the country. And I was looking after operational risk, looking at plant performance, looking at like so whenever we have like large capex projects, when we are refurbishing a whole blast furnace and so on, all of those projects are multi-million rand projects, and if they don't run on time, they really hurt
bleed
us
money.
in terms of production. So that I'm sort of supporting him in that particular capacity, looking after key projects, risks, and operational performance as well.
So you said you shot your shot. I mean, I would argue like the signs of entrepreneurship were already there, because you could have had the breakfast with the CEO and you and ah.
Yeah.
My mom calls them the he dinners. She's going
Yeah.
and but you saw the opportunity and you put it out there.
Yeah.
Took a year, but it happened, right?
Yeah.
So
So I've definitely, I definitely believe that, like, all of entrepreneurs have to be proactive, right? You
Right.
have, but I also feel like some of those skills are not only entirely linked with entrepreneurs. Like if you are managing a production facility with like 2,000 people, you can't do it by being a passive person.
Right.
So like, agreed, there is a context where I've always felt like, look, I need to make things happen. There isn't I'm not a sit back and hope for things to happen type of person.
I mean, your whole career shows that, including from when you were at school. Like, you went out and got the bursary. You planned 2 years. There is that sense of either urgency and agency. Like, you take control of your own destiny.
Yeah. Totally agree. So, and also like that role was very, like, it was very helpful because, when you start to look at operations in that scale, one day you're looking at strikes. The other day you're looking at union negotiations. The other day, it's not just purely just about the technical plant production stuff that you're doing, but you also then starting to look at, okay, as a business as a whole, you try and say, okay, fine, I've got this pot of money in terms of capex production. If I look at which plants do they need refurbishment, lifespan of that plant, how much money am I going to make from it? And also just being part of some of these exco meetings, even though you're not an executive, but you're listening in, because you come there as a person who's sponsored by an executive. I felt like it was a really, really good way of me also learning and like listening. And I remember feeling at one point, I was like, I'm getting tired of just listening to meetings that feel like they're the same. And I remember my boss at the time saying, no, there's so many other lessons and other studies that you can do. What I want you to do for the next 3 months is look at power dynamics in meetings and just focus on listening to that. And yes, do the minutes of meetings and do actions and all of these other things, but focus on power dynamics. And all of a sudden you start seeing exco meetings take a different layer of how people effectively engage.
I was just reading this book, and they said on those dynamics, right? If you take a group of 10 people and like a board meeting, if you place one woman with 9 men, the woman has not major impact in the swaying of the board. In fact, she might say something that is, valuable to that meeting, but no one hears it until another guy says it. And all of a sudden, everybody says, oh, yeah, we should do that. But the lady said it first, right?
Yeah.
And 2, if you put another one, so it's 2 and 8 guys, still same dynamics. And in fact, if anything, if it's 1 or 2 females in a group of 8 men, what happens is that the females assimilate to the men. And it sort of makes sense because that's probably how they got there, right?
Yeah.
You have to always be punching above your weight and assimilate so people take you serious and you feel like you're one of them. But it turns out when you have 3 women out of the 10, all of a sudden the voice changes. It becomes more impactful because they themselves start knowing that they're not 1 out of 9.
Yeah.
So there's like it just changes the dynamic. And once you start looking for those things in any meeting you go to, the meetings take on a whole different meaning.
Yeah.
And you also then start knowing who to be speaking sort of to subliminally in that meeting because you know where, the message is going to land.
Yeah.
So did you take all those insights into the rest of your career before you jumped off to go into entrepreneurship, and how did that serve you in that journey?
Yeah. So I think definitely I did. And I feel like the segue into entrepreneurship for me, I feel like it came at a context where I was searching for something else. So, like, I ended up choosing to do a master's in industrial engineering at Wits.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, it was very much on like, I'm sort of searching, but I don't know what I'm searching for. I definitely felt that within my corporate, it was very clear on how am I going to climb the structure. And I was doing all of the hard
And you were
work.
still in the same corporate.
I was still in the same corporate. Um, and it was very clear that my next role is being an operations manager of a particular factory, managing, I don't know, 200 people. Like that was the natural progression of where I'm going to go, or I have to choose to remain more technical and go back and say, look, how do I become like really great at this particular niche area within engineering? I knew that that was not probably where I'm going to go. I'll probably follow the management route. But I wasn't as I didn't find making steel sexy for the rest of my life. Let me put it that way. I didn't see that being the thing that I wanted to like continue pushing on. I ultimately said, look, I know that I need to change sectors and I need to try and do something else. In effect, there was another friend, varsity friend, who I think is a lot more entrepreneurial than me. He had started a business and he was recruiting me hard. And he's like, look, dude, like, let's come do this thing. And I was on the fence. I was like, reluctant. I was like,
And were you still studying at this time? Or?
And I'd finished.
Okay.
So I'd finished that degree. I was I was still within the corporate structure. And he kept on pitching like really great ideas of what we should do. And I was reading your Jeff Bezos, I was reading your Zappos, Tony Hsieh. I was just consuming all of the entrepreneurial.
So he's pitching you and he doesn't actually have anything. He's just pitching you like he thinks you are a talent and he needs a co-founder for whatever.
Exactly. So he's at Hatch. He's pitching me this idea of like let's go be the next Jeff Bezos of our country. Like let's go look and like all of the books he's just delivering. And I'm reading, I'm looking at the Steve Jobs stuff, and definitely felt like that grooming was there. But ultimately because there was this itch of like I want to go do something. And I remember the framing at that time, I kept on like having this thing of like, how do we move from being consumers to producers? Like that was just like, it was a thing of like, do you want to go, like there was a burning sensation of like, I want to go create something.
I call it the pros and cons. Like, producers got pro and consumers got con. And it's like it's so hidden in plain sight that you are either on this side or on this side.
So there was a very strong desire of like I want to go create something, but I just don't know what that is. And I'm reading about the Silicon Valleys of this world, and I'm reading about all of these entrepreneurs, and I'm like, okay, cool. I think this is what I should do. And as a result, like as I said, like it was a confluence of things that just kept on coming together, where then entrepreneurship itself, with Vinu, it was very much on like, let's go build this business. And we started with the premise of like, we know that we need to go build a business. We just don't know what to build it in. Then we started trying to merge into...
What was his background?
So he did electrical as well, but he did electrical and computer. So he was more on the programming side, on the product
Systems
technology
engineering side,
side as well. Initially, he started his career as an engineer working for Hatch, like an engineering consulting firm. But ultimately was very, very clear that tech is the new thing. There has to be something that we build. All of these other entrepreneurs that have gone the tech route have built things that have scaled, that have reached many people, that have created impact, but also have created wealth. And I think a lot of us sometimes forget that entrepreneurship is also a wealth creation strategy.
Right.
And it is a path, and it is a journey. And careers can do that too, but I think entrepreneurship does have a lever that one can effectively be able to pull,
agency,
and to be able to accelerate as well. So it did feel like it wasn't like, I feel like it's not a typical story of like, ooh, I had this brilliant idea, then I wanted to become an entrepreneur. I felt like it was a context of then being able to say, ooh, entrepreneurship is actually can be a good career step for me at that point.
That's interesting. You're the only person I know who looked at entrepreneurship as a career.
Well, at the
career
time,
step. Yeah.
up until I walked in.
Yeah, and then you realize, oh. So tell me, like,
Yeah.
when you did eventually, firstly, what was the trigger that eventually made you jump ship?
Yeah.
Did you have a product or idea by then? That's why you jumped. And and how was it like the first couple of weeks when you realized you don't have the machine of a corporate to lean on?
Yeah. I think for me, we started just like during because we consume so much entrepreneurial read up around go sell without having a product, don't spend time on creating anything. And effectively, we had our first sale with Aramex as a logistics firm. They're like, cool, we'll buy that thing if you guys build it. And here's the money for it. And ultimately, we're like, snap, now we have a commitment from a company and we've been selling thin air.
Vaporware.
And now we need to go build this thing.
And it's a scary thing because, like, normally you're busy popping the champagne, thinking, we closed it. And then you realize that pop wasn't the bottle popping, it was the gun.
Pop.
Yeah, it's the gun saying it's starting. Like, you need to,
so
starting blocks.
We had gravitated towards logistics as a space. We had gravitated towards courier as a space, and we'd gravitated towards we need to create tech in this particular space. And he ended up quitting a lot earlier. I was still reluctant. I still needed the cash. And he then started attending meetings, and I would skip work to attend meetings.
It is what it is.
I'd skip work to attend meetings. I would just like keep, and at that time I still lived in the Vaal, and this was happening all in Joburg. So if it's a meeting at 10 o'clock in Joburg, I'm effectively leaving an hour early to drive, attend the meeting, drive back to work, and so on. So fast forward, that wasn't practical. The theme that we had at the time is that you can't be half pregnant.
My favorite
You have
words.
to be fully pregnant.
Yeah.
You have to be in it. And quit, move to Joburg. Also, like, in the context of money. So at the time, my partner had a lot more money. I didn't, but I needed 50% ownership. So I wanted an equal stake. It was an issue of like how much money we're putting. We need to put the same. So I had to go cold turkey. And what that means is that I needed to literally restructure my life, move from living in a nice 2-bedroom flat to going back to a digs sort of setup, cancelled medical aid, cancelled
the first thing to go.
Yeah, cancelled anything that effectively took money out of like all of these like pension funds. You like stop these contributions, gone, and be fully pregnant with this thing. Ultimately, the first year was difficult. Also, sometimes we don't talk about partner friction as well. We fall in love with the idea, we fall in love with what it's going to look like, but also you realize that you are building a relationship and it has frictions.
And you're raising a child together,
and
essentially.
you're raising a child together, and it's just so I think 18 months in, we still did not have a product, and the relationship friction was extremely high. When I quit my job, when I cancelled medical aids and did all of these things, then I got diagnosed with TB. And I was still now fully pregnant with this other business. I've cancelled medical aid. I'm going back to a public clinic to go take my TB treatment. In that whole journey. And obviously I'm trying to manage this new condition and this business. And obviously, like when you quit your job and your parents say the first thing that should not go is medical aid, and that's the first thing that you threw out. And then here you are, you're sick, and you're not going to pay out of pocket for a 6-month, 8-month treatment. Like it's gonna cripple you.
And plus, generally, you're under so much stress, your immune system is probably taking a knock. And those are the things people don't realize. Like when it gets tough, I remember when you're growing up and you hear people saying stress.
Yeah.
It seems like such a satiric thing, stress. Like,
Yeah.
these adults, they like putting names to things.
Yeah.
But when you really go through it,
Yeah. You're in it. So I'm a patient in the one end, I'm an entrepreneur in the one end, and I'm trying to manage these particular two things. And also I have a business relationship that's
friction.
difficult. Ultimately, we make the harsh decision of collapsing that first business. I've moved to Joburg. I've left my engineering sort of career, and I'm faced with this decision of like, do I start another business? Do I go back to work? Remember going to a recruitment agency and saying, I'm in the market. Tell me what I'm worth. That recruitment agent literally found me 4 job interviews within a space of a week. Went to interview for all 4, got all 4 with really great packages. And I was like, reject all 4. I'm valuable to the market. I can definitely get a job if I need it. And I decided to start another business, which was Technovera.
And again, that's something that gets lost in messaging.
Yeah.
So at that point, all you just wanted was reassurance.
Yeah, I needed reassurance. Because the thing is, I had about 6 months worth of rent money at that time. And remember, I invested in that previous business, and we were hiring developers. We were we had staff that we were paying, and all of that was coming from savings that we had. When we catch in those pension funds and put it into the business account, like that is where the money was coming from. So when we closed that first business, it was a context of like, and at the time, I'm living in a shared flat with a friend who's paying way more rent than I am, because it's an issue of like, look, I work at Nedbank, you are starting this entrepreneurship thing, let me carry more of the rental at least. And like those are some of the decisions that your support structures also providing. But at the same time, you arrive at this, oh snap, am I valuable to the market if I'm closing this one business? Can I actually get a job at that time? And I think just somebody, like all 4 of them saying, yes, we want you, like really, really boosted my mind at that time. And I was like, I want to start a new business. And
are you still with your partner at this point?
No, we had closed that business.
So that means you both exited.
We both exited that one. Yeah. It didn't go anywhere. I now have to create a new one.
Which is like, and this is with the guy who got you into this whole ecosystem. Like now you have to say it was good.
Yeah, it was good. I'm in it now. And because the contention was, do I go back to career, or do I continue on the entrepreneurship? And remember, I also don't have an idea of what I want to do now. But because I was a patient and I kept on just having this like experience, I'm like, no, man, there has to be something within this particular space that I've been experiencing as a patient, and I feel like I should create something there. So I feel like that's how Technovera technically was born, and that's how the idea of Pellebox sort of came up. Of me then starting to say,
I like these mixed metaphors. So you were pregnant all this time, and eventually you gave birth to, ironically, in a hospital. So maybe that's a good segue to double click on your now business, your baby Technovera, and particularly what you're doing in communities. So so I guess the problem that I realized was that as a patient, I'm going to a clinic, I'm losing about 3 hours in a queue every time I have to go collect my treatment. And it was that realization of the time loss. And I mean, at the time, I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm feeling the time loss. I'm feeling the half a day completely gone. And yes, fine, I'm not going to dock my own pay at least. But when you're in the queue, you're seeing a construction worker guy effectively coming in saying, hey guys, can I please skip to the queue? I'm at work. If I have to lose these 4 hours, I'm effectively going to lose that time. And obviously everybody will say, fine, skip the queue. And you're looking at who else is sitting in the queue with you. You're looking at this whole dynamism. And I think for me, it was also like life had played its own funny tricks in a way. I'd gone from being a technical assistant to the COO for one of the largest steel manufacturing. To the humility of sitting in a queue.
To the humility of sitting in a queue and just ultimately saying, like disease cripples you. It
Yeah.
literally just brings
And
you.
where did you catch? I mean, this is an ignorant question. Like,
Yeah.
where the hell do you like meet up with TV?
I
mean,
don't
like,
know, bro. I literally don't know. Another time, my partner is like, she's like, I don't understand how you got this TV. Like, where? So turns out that like my mother had TV, my grandmother had TV. So within my family, all of us have this
disposition to it.
disposition to it. And whenever it just activates, or whenever you get some degree of dust, or if you like, a lot of people, you'll get a lot of exposure to TB. A lot of people just, it doesn't activate as much as easy. But for
So
our
it's not necessarily communicable. It's not like you catch it.
it's through coughing.
Yeah.
It's through. That's why when you have somebody with TB, it's very much on how do you make sure.
Yeah.
But it is about it also being activated within you as well. That effectively gives, then you start coughing, it starts just infecting your lungs, or in my case, it's TB of the lungs.
There's other kinds of TB?
Yeah, there's bone TB, there's a lot of different types of TBs.
Wow.
Yeah. So ultimately, there was this whole crippling moment where I'm a patient, I'm using public healthcare system, gone is the vitalities, the discoveries, they're completely gone. And you are then ultimately like seeing the time loss. And obviously at the beginning of your TB program, you're spending like every second week, you have to go to the clinic to go collect treatment. After about a month or two, then you can do it every month, or at least at that time, that was the program regiment. And there's a degree of detesting the journey to the clinic and the time loss and all of the inefficiency.
Why couldn't they just give you your whole program once off?
So at the
You don't have
beginning,
to
it's
go
also
back.
about trying to see what treatment works for you. So hence the follow-up and the checkup.
Okay, makes sense.
And TB treatment is quite aggressive in your body. So it's also about looking at the side effects and trying to understand, does this treatment work for you? But on top of it, are you actually managing it?
Okay.
There's also all of these other social structures where you can't drink when you're on TB medication. So all of your love for your Hunter's Dry, your Heineken, gone.
And also the other thing I've come to realize is that the biggest other aspect to people sticking to their chronic scripts is food, like just eating the right food.
Yeah.
In fact, I was having a conversation with someone the other day. What blew my mind, they were a doctor. They were saying, you know, they're working on diabetes, like which is a passion of ours, right? So hospitals are the biggest culprits in, I suppose, exacerbating in that the food in hospitals is so dodged, bro. Like they're trying to essentially put you on a treatment for diabetes. Meanwhile, they're giving you jelly and all these like food in hospitals is no good.
The food prep versus the treatment requirements. There isn't like a coordination between those two.
You would think.
Yeah. And it becomes a difficult journey. And obviously, there's a context where when you are coughing blood, when it's painful every time, and like I was at a point where if somebody makes me laugh,
in pain,
it's literally because you start with like your diaphragm does this, then you start laughing, then the laugh turns into a cough, and then you're like, I hate that joke because
it makes you,
it makes you,
and also that means
the pain.
Because the pain is internal. That means eating is also becomes very
the eating wasn't so difficult. I think it was and also like, I mean, fortunate enough with TB medication, the minute you start within the first couple of weeks, let's say if you're coughing blood, all of that subsides very quickly. And that's also because the treatment is quite aggressive.
Right.
But ultimately, often enough after 3 months, guess what? You are faced with the contention of, do I continue to go to the clinic because I'm already feeling well versus I actually have to stick to this particular treatment. So I always give an analogy to anybody who's on, like, if you start an antibiotic treatment,
finish it.
It's important to finish it.
But most people don't finish it.
Guess what?
No, we don't.
The minute you feel great. Now imagine you have to be on ARVs for the rest of your life and you're already feeling great. And now you have to contend with losing half a day going to a public clinic. When you're feeling good, you're like, my life is good. Like, why? And the problem with all of that is that if
it's the friction of having to stay on it.
And that start, stop, your body doesn't work well with that. And that's why for me, this contention of long queues as a barrier for people, it's almost like it's not even a medical thing, it's a context problem.
It's a friction thing. It's like anything.
It's a high friction.
Mm.
You think about going to home affairs?
It's friction.
Like friction.
Yeah.
You think about going to, well, SARS?
Yeah.
Friction.
I had to go renew my license disc because of long stories. But
Yes.
friction.
Friction. And the hypothesis at the time that I was developing was that if you can make it way more convenient for me as a person, I'm likely to stick to my treatment. If I stick to my treatment, I'm likely to have good clinical outcomes. And that journey of make it easy for people so that they can take their treatment and they can get well. And obviously within the HIV community, right, you'll have a whole conversation around the holy grail, and what everybody's trying to achieve is get to zero infections so that we reduce the spread of HIV. But to get to zero infection, you want to be able to have viral suppression. So viral suppression just means that you get to a point where the level of the virus on your body is almost undetectable, and that reduces anybody's ability to spread. And the beauty of getting to viral suppression is that if you stick to your treatment and you're compliant, you'll get there. You'll feel better, but at the same time, you'll get to a point where we do so well as a country to reduce the spread of HIV.
But don't you still have then that exact problem like with the TB? That now you are feeling so great and your viral load is so low.
Yeah.
Then the temptation is to stop. I mean,
exactly.
It's human nature.
And I think for me it was the context of like, keep on dealing with the friction point. Make it so convenient, make it so easy for someone to say, this is almost as if me just passing in my local spaza shop and collecting what
groceries.
I need. And let me just like integrate it into people's lives in such a way that it doesn't feel like a pain. It doesn't feel like I'm going out of my way to manage my health.
And this is therefore your business. This is what you do now. So maybe tell us a little bit more specifically about that.
Perfect. Yeah. So we went on a journey of effectively developing these digital lockers where
paleo boxes,
where you can take a pre-packed medication, load it into a box, sort of think of it as like an ATM / post box.
Like those DSV sort of things.
Yeah. So you'd be able to take your medication. Your pharmacy would be able to take your medication, put it in a locker. It sends an SMS saying, "Hi, Miles, your medication is ready for collection. Here's a one-time PIN." Miles would simply go to Mamelodi, go to Alex, go to where his locker is, enter his cell phone number, enter his PIN. Door pops open. He collects his parcel inside, closes door. He's on his way. The pharmacy is able to see all of the parcels that have been collected. They're able to see patients that are sticking to their treatment cycles. And this is primarily for chronically stable patients, so patients that are on the same repeat treatment. The treatment has been tested, it's working well. And it was also very deliberate for us to be able to say, who has this problem? If I'm a Marlene on Discovery and I can get my ARV medication delivered to my home, I don't have to face long queues. But if I'm a Neo in Mamelodi, I'm going to my local clinic.
I'm a construction worker.
I'm a construction worker. And, within our healthcare system, you've got 82% of us that relies on our public healthcare space. And the journey was, how do we make public healthcare work a lot more effective? Because I don't think South Africa exists in a reality where we can do without public healthcare. We need public healthcare to work well. And we can always point fingers at government to say, no, you're not doing this well, you're not doing this well.
Is that why this NHI push is an important one? Is government's realization that, something's got to give, and then and private sector is like, well, we are the best ones to provide the service, and there's this sort of, at least from a layperson, it seems like I can't understand why they're not working with each other from where I'm standing, right?
Yeah. And again, I feel like NHS sometimes is misunderstood. And I know people have different politics about it.
Right.
But the reality is universal healthcare at a quality level is something that I feel like every South African agrees on. We want to agree on the context that we want to get equitable access to healthcare to everyone so that people have really good access. But we still have this two system where somebody who's on system A gets a particular level of care, somebody who's on system B gets a particular level of care. And the reality is that economic position is a determinant of which system you play in. And I think because we are so, like, we've gone through injustices of the past, we know what inequality looks like, we know what, and apartheid is a very good, I guess it's helped frame the fabric of who we are as a people. But to a large extent, we went, like NHI for me represents this idea of how can we contract services from different players, such as GPs. If a GP is closer to me in my community than my local clinic, why should I be skipping this GP and having to go directly to my local clinic
and create queues and bottlenecks when there's a GP close
and
by?
That GP might say, look, and again, NHI is trying to say, if I can pay a GP 400 Rand to see each and every patient, and I can do it at scale, and I can effectively make sure that I use all of the facilities that are available to serve the larger community, and I contract it into a pooling structure that allows me to buy services from different people. And a lot of that sometimes gets lost in the idea of, like, how is it going to improve access? How is it going to improve? If NEO is going and setting up a lot of lockers in communities, effectively those become, I guess, assets that can be utilized to be able to serve more and more people in communities.
Then why seemingly private sector is against this when clearly this thing is something that works everywhere in the world? I mean, first world countries have a shared health service.
I think this is my personal opinion. I think it is about the context of margins. I do think that it's a context of price point. I think that
so government will pay you less than you would if somebody walked in.
And again, if you walk into a high end, specialist, you're effectively forking whatever they want, right? You're paying that 2,000 rands per consult. You're paying blah, blah, blah. And unfortunately, NHI can't work in that context. You are reliant on economics of scale. You are effectively trying to then say, but if I'm providing you with more volume, shouldn't we effectively be able to arrive at a price point that works? And even in the private sector, part of why medical aids pull towards saying this is the network that we want you to use is for that for the same thing. It's just that we still wanted to have these barriers where this particular facility is only serving this particular group of people. I do understand that, yes, and also when you are introducing change, you are telling other people to be able to say, let's try and do something different. And it's sometimes, some people feel like you're taking out of my plate to give to somebody else's plate.
And also they think you're taking away the predictability of what is now currently working for me.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be in a situation like you were facing when you were sitting in that public hospital. So the logic is, are we, decreasing it to
a lower level
to serve more, like to the lowest common denominator. But I think you've articulated well the challenges. So then how do you participate and run your business under this quagmire? Because I'm sure it's still going to take time.
Yeah.
But currently people need chronic meds now.
Yeah. So, and maybe just again going back, right? So 2014, NHI had already been a conversation already then. And a lot of it's become, we sit here in 2024 feeling 10 years later, feeling like, we're reacting to this thing. But it had been an inception like way earlier. So in 2014, one of the things that the National Department of Health decided to do was to say, let us test a couple of models that help us see how we can contract services from, I guess, either service providers. This can be NGOs. This can be private companies. But we want to be able to have this pooling effect of being able to say, as government, we want to focus on one portion of what we should do, which is administration.
It's almost like with ESCOM, with independent power producers. It's like
Exactly.
government can't do it everything
Government
anymore.
can't do it
Anywhere in the
everything.
world.
Yeah.
They don't have the wherewithal. So they
Exactly.
need to say, look, what is our strengths? And then let's pool our resources and distribute the stuff that isn't our strengths.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So NHI, for me, NHI represents a particular opportunity. Let's say, for instance, I'm Neo, I'm a gung-ho entrepreneur, and I feel like day clinics are the thing that I really want to be able to provide into the market. And I go establish a network of day clinics very much within the context that I want to target a particular population group. And on top of that, I want to be able to target government using my infrastructure as a pooling effect to be able to provide service. And I think those are the newer sort of innovations that the newer models that can effectively evolve. In the same way, within the private sector, I can specialize and say, I want to just offer dialysis. And I'm just going to run a specialized facility that just offers dialysis to medical aid schemes. So there isn't a lot of things that I knew here. It's just about the structure of like, okay, we want to do it at this level, at a national level, at a policy level. Going back to my business, so we effectively went on a journey of engaging with the National Department of Health, engaging with City of Tshwane, City of Ekurhuleni, and saying, look, guys, we have this idea. We want to test it out. I initially started saying, I just want one clinic. Can you just give me one clinic? Obviously, within the entrepreneurship journey, you want to find capital to build what you need to build. And competitions are helpful, Miles. Sometimes competitions are helpful. Apply for that thing, shoot your shot. Somebody might say, look, this is worth having. I shot my shot in 2016, 2017. I applied for something called Hack Josie. It was run by a city of Johannesburg. It was looking for innovations that can improve public service. It was technically government money. Applied, they gave me R1 million. I went and built a product out of that. So I built that first smart locker. Went back to the city of Johannesburg and said, can I have one clinic? Yo, I struggled.
And here's the irony, right? Like they gave you money, state money, to build a solution to make the city better. And then now
I struggled.
You can't get them as a client.
Yeah, City of Johannesburg, if you are listening to this, I'd love. Anyway, so fast forward.
What, you mean you still don't have a clinic?
Anyway, so fast forward, I went to City of Tshwane. I said, can you give me a clinic? And they're like, we are unsure. You need to talk to National Department of Health. I went to National Department of Health. I was like, guys, this is my idea. And again, I know this sounds like, but this is like proper hustle. Like going to Pretoria, going to reception, talking to people, say, I want to talk to this person about this thing. Do you have a meeting? I don't have a meeting. Are you willing to wait? Yes, I'm willing to wait. Oh, no, go away. No, but when do they
But
take
I'm already
lunch?
here. Can I just wait?
Can I talk to them? So anyway, I arrived at a point where I was like, no, but this thing is not regulated. Who's going to regulate this thing? You need to go speak to Pharmacy Council. I'm like, okay, that's a regulator. Let me go. I remember posting on Facebook. Is there anybody in my circle who knows Pharmacy Council? I've never talked to these guys. And fortunate enough, a friend of mine, So somebody was like, no, you don't just go to Pharmacy Council. You have to, And then I was like, okay. I then wrote a post saying, anybody within my network who's a pharmacist, can I please speak to you? I'll pay for your drinks and your meal. Let's have a conversation. I really want to understand how I bring this product to life. Fast forward, kept on just speaking to people. This is like 6 months worth of journey, by the way. So a half a year of my life. Up until somebody said, we think this could work. We're willing to structure it in this way for us to test if it can work. So we started our first locker in Mamelodi, Stanza 2, where we put a locker. We started getting the first group of patients to use it, started getting really great feedback of like this thing. So the idea was, can we get somebody to collect their medication in under 2 minutes? Into the clinic, out. And they've got what they need. And that was sort of like the initial hypothesis. To date, we're able to get a patient to collect medication in less than 22 seconds on average across all of the communities that we serve. Walking in, walking out. And obviously the context was still within this idea of like, how do you use technology How do you chase impact in communities? And more importantly, how do you also build something that can scale? So for me, right from the onset, those were the three ingredients that I was looking at, like impact. Obviously, technology is the conduit for it. Ultimately, scale, and within all of these, can it be sustainable? And can it also make money? And I think sometimes within the social impact
people
space,
forget the money
we forget the money part. We forget the fact that by honoring a person, you have to make it sustainable.
Yeah, and just because it's a non-profit, it doesn't mean it mustn't be profitable.
Exactly. It doesn't mean that it has to, like, and again, sometimes I guess surplus or profitability is also a way for you to reinvest in it, scale into more communities.
100%.
And I think sometimes we wanna be lazy and stop doing the work and the thinking at a point where we feel like, but it's working. But it's only working for one community or two communities. When it is scaled and it's working in Northern KZN, I don't know, Eastern Cape, is it still financially sustainable? Like, can you still make sure that it works? When you are now scaling into Namibia, to Botswana, can it still work?
Yeah.
And I think for me, those were some of the things that I was deeply chasing after.
And how did you know that it was working? Now that you know, because you obviously then moved off from the version 1, 2, 3. Like, what were the signs? How did you see that it's actually?
I think sometimes it's a context of, so obviously we have we have a user, which is the patient who's effectively using the product. So the first sign was obviously them telling us that it's working,
right?
Them using it every day. If anything happens, them being upset at the fact that it is not working the way that I want it to work. I think that was the first part. And then the second part was very much on starting to see the stakeholders around the National Department of Health, City of Ekurhuleni,
coming to you now,
coming and saying, okay, cool. How do we do the second clinic? What happens after the first one? What needs to happen? And I think that pulling effect where other people are starting to say, we also have a vested interest in wanting to see this work. And then ultimately, it's also in the context of, am I able to pay staff? Am I able to hire more people? Am I able to cover the cost of running this thing?
And on the customer side, are there any drop-offs? You know, let's try that again. How much? Okay, cool. So in the context of the end user, are there any drop-offs? You know, used to say that, you know, you can get your meds in 22 seconds. Has that led to people sticking to the treatment, and do like track and trace that?
Yeah. So we, in fact, within the pharmacy space, you call it non-adherence. So you try and look at, are people still coming and collecting their medication, and are they taking it? So obviously, let's say from an HIV perspective, every 6 months you assess their viral load. And that normally tells you, is this person still sticking to their treatment or not? So and that's the first thing that we had to show. So obviously it's all glamorous me saying it now, but I had to spend 2 years of my life
just waiting for the
running
data sets,
a pilot, waiting for the data to say that this thing is has positive clinical outcomes, meaning that we haven't introduced an innovation that has negative clinical outcomes. It's either making the people better or blah, blah, blah. And then similarly, it's also a context of being able to say, are people coming to collect their medication? So typically within a public healthcare space, you might have anything from 15% to 22% of people not coming to collect their treatment. And this is people who are sick, where you're like, you know what treatment they're supposed to be on, but just because of inconvenience, they don't adhere. Within our lockers, we still see, we have about 3% of our parcels not being collected. So that means that even if you've made it convenient,
there's
sometimes
still a reason why people
there's still other reasons why people still choose not to connect. Obviously, but the
could
delta
be so many
is,
variables, though.
Yeah,
They could have had an accident. There could have so many things that have happened in that month.
The delta is, let's take it from 22% non-adherence to effectively less than 3% non-adherence. So I think that's the work that we've added to this particular equation. And going back to your question around how do you also start to test if it's working, it's also now starting to let's say, and governments talk, right? So National Ministry of Health and Social Services in Namibia speaks to the National Department of Health in South Africa to say, what are you guys doing here? Oh, we're interested in that product. Could we try and see and copy what is happening? And I think for me, sometimes as an entrepreneur, those are validation points where people are coming and saying, we like what you're doing here. We're interested in us applying it in this particular context.
But out of interest, government has got so many touch points to its citizens, right? They had post offices, they have the hospitals, they have so many touch points. Why wouldn't they have just done this to begin with?
Yeah.
From to me it feels like schools. There's so many physical infrastructures that they actually have that are in communities.
Yeah.
Why do you think they've never leaned into that? Is it because it's not their lane?
Spot on. I think sometimes it's a siloship approach.
Yeah.
So health looks at it from a health perspective. So in health, I'm focusing on clinical outcomes. But a role of an innovator is to bridge that.
Looking at ecosystems.
To be able to say, okay, I know that this is a health product, but what if I was to integrate it into education? I know that this is a access to medication. How would I link it with access to nutrition? And I think those translators and that ability to be able to see how, and yes, sometimes a government official in National Department of Health is not concerned about, do I go put medication at a public library, for instance? Because they have so many things that they're trying to think about.
And regulations, I suppose.
And regulations. And I also think it's about an external party effectively coming in and saying, no, but this is an obvious link.
Or I care enough about it to fix it.
Yeah, I care enough to fix it. How do I inject my effort into saying, let us do this?
So now let's assume I have a check.
Yeah.
All right. And I'm willing to cut you a check right now. Where would you use the money and how much would you need to fundamentally and systemically fix the problem?
Yeah. I think for me, if I think about the framing of this problem, it's a combination of access where you make it so easy for people to access their treatment. And then I think about what are we doing right now? We're trying to bring that medication as close to the patient as possible. And a portion of that is building a really good network that allows you to be able to do that. I think arriving at a point where a patient does not have to leave their community, spend money on a taxi fare, trying to get to a point where they can access care is ultimately the holy grail of pure convenience, access that is good in quality and allows somebody to access their treatment. So there's a piece where I'm like, that is building up that network with partners, ensuring, I like the example that you gave around the post office. It is a pain for me as a South African, looking at, for instance, in Botswana, we're putting our lockers in post offices. And in South Africa, I can't because we're closing down the post offices. It's so painful to see that infrastructure going away, knowing that infrastructure can be such a good conduit
and it's
to
already
create
there.
That facility. It's already there.
In right sites. It's accessible.
And it's painful if you give me, 210 million rand and you say, now go build that infrastructure. Whereas I could have said, but it's already there.
Then you could have used the money for scaling.
I could have used the money
for innovation.
For other things as well. And there is a context where, and we may just read about the post office closing, but it does have an impact on people. I don't know if you've had to renew your license recently or your disc, and you have to now try and search for where to go. It's painful.
I was doing that yesterday.
It's so painful.
Yeah.
And it's easy to read.
Painful and unnecessary. It's it's interesting. You're busy removing friction from a healthcare perspective. Indirectly, the demise of the post office is increasing friction.
Yeah. So my view has always been, okay, fine. Fine, I can cry about the post office closing, but I can also be a South African and say, we still have to build this country. We still have to build the infrastructure. We still have to make sure that the services that people need are designed and built for. And I think I do take an opportunity of being able to say, look, if we build a network of lockers, let's arrive at a point where somebody can effectively, if we digitize license renewals, go collect your
Your medicine with your license disc.
your medicine with your license disc, if it comes to that.
Mm.
The reality is that these problems are not going to go away, and we do have to keep on investing in building this country. Miles.
So are you saying you're going to take my check to go build post offices?
I will build a better post office. That's a lot
Mm.
more efficient.
Mm.
Or I will build a network of collection points that allows people to access what they need.
Mm. Because then it could serve multiple
Multi-purpose.
offerings, right?
Yeah, and I mean, fine. Maybe I should buy the post office and buy whatever infrastructure still exists, and then try and
Look,
privatize
that one
and run
I'm
that.
not convinced on. In that, I think there would be a better utilization of that money in building things that have less luggage.
Yeah, and are
You
more
know,
fit for purpose and are a
Yeah,
lot more
yeah.
digital, are a lot more efficient,
and
as
more
well.
direct in the community, smaller or smarter.
Exactly.
Like, I think there's a reason why things like the airlines and all these things like post offices, they struggle when they get to a certain point, is because they're carrying, no pun
So much
intended, in
luggage,
in the airline example, they're carrying too much luggage, right?
Yeah.
And if there's one thing you don't need is weight when you
Yeah.
are, and as an entrepreneur, you'd know agility is actually the differentiator. So, and also there's still other amazing spaces we could look and think about. I'm often puzzled about how much real estate sits empty outside certain work hours.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like just
Yeah.
parking lots alone.
Yeah.
You know how many malls have parking lots, right? And so maybe that would be a better way of looking at the problem statement. Like this conversation is so big in that health affects every human being.
Yeah.
And I look at health on two sides. There's health when things have gone wrong, which is pretty much the space you play in, where you are remedying something that's already gone wrong.
Yeah.
So that's the big pharma side. I care about the big pharma, the agro-processing side, where maybe we could reduce more people who are reliant on big pharma or the med side if people just could eat better.
Exactly.
Properly from day zero, because half of these challenges, especially the comorbidities and the chronic ailments, most of them stem from diet.
Yeah. And there's a context where you are able to access certain things cheaper than you are able to access more nutritious things. But anyway, like there's also a context of, you're right, it is about being able to say, how do we build a culture where we eat better so that we never have to manage a chronic condition. And within the continent, and we have all of this young energy that that we
young
have.
population,
but there's almost like this, if we don't do this right now, you're going to sit with a growing population, a really growing continent of people that have the highest amount of chronic conditions. And I feel like that would be so sad for us to arrive at 100 years from now where we had this ballooning effect on opportunity just because we didn't
do an act.
We didn't act to create the culture of eating right.
Do you think we have that sense of agency? Because that multiplier impact is something that should be keeping us up at night. In the same manner, there's a lot of rhetoric and urgency around climate. Like, why don't we have that about that fact that in South Africa, the number one killer of women is diabetes? Like, where's that? Where, like we had treatment action campaign around HIV. Like,
we don't have that.
And this stuff is killing people daily, and it seems like it's not as topical. I mean, you're in this space. Why is that?
It's a context where it's hidden. It's at an individual level. And because it creeps at you so slowly and so like it accumulates over time. And there is it's the same as like, if you think about like the, I guess, from people feeling like, okay, cool, we need to take mental health seriously. there would have been generations and generations where we don't have that context because it's either not
Hidden.
talked enough, hidden,
Ridiculed.
like ridiculed and so on. And there is a context where I feel like, and I mean, maybe there's also an opportunity for a lot of our influencers to say, look, we are cultural trendsetters. How do we make this sexy? How do we make
Eating healthy.
people eating healthy a trend? How do we make sure that this becomes the thing that our generation wants to be known for? When 100 years from now, when we talk about people that have gone to success, can it be those farmers that have ultimately benefited from a trend of people saying we want to eat well?
Interestingly, though, in for okay, last question. Interestingly, though, in this case, I'm assuming all these things are trending upwards, which means your total addressable market for you is actually growing. You're getting, you're in an industry that is gonna be, if we continue at these rates, you're in a good business essentially.
And I feel like that's like it's the same as somebody who's in the burial business.
Yeah.
Ultimately saying
business.
no, HIV pandemic has hit. It's such a problem at a societal level that I don't believe that somebody who's in the burial business is celebrating the fact that the HIV pandemic hit us. Like it's a problem, and I sometimes wonder whether my energy should be channeled to say, you know what, like pause this trajectory that we're on, double click and check on something else, focus on the prevention journey. But I also still feel like we still live in a time when we still have more new HIV infection cases. We still haven't won that battle of zero spread. And there is a room where I feel like a context of still promoting
the med side
and the convenience is a significant portion of how I can spend my time right now. And maybe fine, we arrive at a point where we've saturated what we need to do and we have to change our efforts to focus on the prevention piece, to focus on the narrative around what good, healthy lifestyles needs to look like.
But it's also not mutually exclusive. The likes of us can work on this side, the likes of you can work on that side.
And we can partner.
And that's exactly what we're doing. So now, I mean, we can go on, and because this is such a big problem statement that needs, firstly, breaking down silos. It needs expertise. It needs capital. It needs time. It needs all these things almost rowing in the same direction, because I would hate to be in a situation 10, 15 years from now, this thing has ballooned into something that is we can't backpedal from, because it's now so systemic. It will take a generation before we even just start making it back to ground zero. So I can't thank you enough for your time, but more importantly, I can't thank you enough for the work that you continue to do, particularly in these in the hard terrain that you've chosen as a path, particularly as you also claim that you are not a willing entrepreneur. You're dragged into this because of a lived experience. So thanks a lot, buddy. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Mal.
Sharp.